now call this workshop of the Bryan Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this workshop has been duly called, and that notice of this workshop has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meeting Acts, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. We want to welcome everyone here today on this warm Monday, first Monday of June. So welcome. Citizens may make comments about topics relevant to district business. Topics should be limited to 3 minutes. Comments concerning specific students or personnel will be heard in closed session. Do we have any comments? No. Thank you. So we'd ask that you turn off the sound on all electronic devices if you've not already done so. And we will be going a little bit out of order this afternoon. We're first going to do our spotlight, and then we will be going into closed session, and then we'll be returning to handle the rest of our business. So we welcome our HEB Excellence in Education finalist, who we will be recognizing Christy Byerly. And we are going to recognize our Executive Director of School Leadership, Linda Montoya, to do that recognition. Thank you, Linda.
All right, if I could have Christy Byerly come up.
Yay.
So Christy Byerly has made history. Yay. For the first time in Bryan ISD, Ms. Byerly, with over 31 years of experience in education, was honored by HEB with the Excellence in Education Award. The HEB Excellence in Education Awards recognize outstanding educators across the state for their passion and commitment to the teaching profession and for showing innovation and creativity in the classroom. And so currently, Ms. Byerly is a first grade teacher at Branch Elementary, and we just wanted to tell you how proud we are of you and thank you for everything that you do for the students in Bryan ISD. So congratulations.
I have to ask Ms. Byerly, I knew you in high school. I mean, not in high school, you're younger.
When I worked at
What all grade levels, yes, because I know you've
the only
helped.
grade levels I've not taught are 3rd and 4th.
I don't know what's going on with my.
And 10, 11, 12.
You've done so much for our school system. I've taught with you, and I just appreciate you so
Thank you so much, Miss. I think you're pretty special too.
He signed your first paycheck 31 years ago?
That's a lot, Julie.
Okay, ready to close now?
Did you hear that? David signed her first paycheck 31 years ago.
The quill.
That's awesome. I can
Okay.
sign them to this day.
As I mentioned, we will be changing the order of our posted agenda a bit. So the board will now convene in closed session to discuss the following items as allowed by Texas Government Code, Chapter 551.074, .072, and .0821. It is now 12:06 p.m. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussion in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes in the open meeting. It is now 12:06 p.m., 12:07 p.m. All right. The board reconvened from closed session at 2:36 PM. No action was taken in closed session. All right, so we will now move to our standing committee meeting update from our finance committee. I've asked Mr. Stasny to provide that update briefly.
We met on May 29th. All three of our committee were there, Dr. Harlan, Mr. Gonzalez, and myself, and Ms. Carabine, Dr. Ibarra, and Mr. Besaw. I'll just keep it real quick because we're going to hear some more today anyway about, almost said tonight, but we're getting close, aren't we? No, I'm kidding. We discussed the budget development. We talked a lot about all the things that are up for renewal, and I won't go into detail on those. Some of those at least are on the consent agenda. I think we also did talk about one of the things that I think is maybe on the agenda about the fact that unfortunately what's going on, I guess, at Sadberry now will be somewhat more expensive than original because of all the delays that were certainly not entirely the district's fault that we had to deal with, and so that has caused costs to go up. So I'm going to just leave it at that. I think that's
Perfect.
the summary.
Thank you. We will now move to, we have two information items. First, we will hear from our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, Mr. Kevin Besaw, who's going to again talk about development of the 2024-2025 budget.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So we just have a little bit, just a small update today. We'll go through because we've covered most everything in the last meeting, and there's been not a lot of changes or updates since the last one. We just want to go through that. Just remember, we're working on creating a more streamlined and efficient model. That's probably our biggest goal with working through this, besides maintaining a healthy balance in our high quality of instructional resources and high quality staff. Of course, we still want to make sure we have the public school finance in Texas. Of course, we get the $61.60 per student each year, and we represent that with a cup. And of course, we'll go through the next. This one explains a little bit more about the property tax increase. And so when the size of our cup comes from our average daily attendance, that's set by the state, and that determines what our ultimate funding will be, the total amount. And then the local property taxes fill up a certain portion of that cup, and you can see on the left side it fills it to a certain level. On the right side, we assume property taxes or property values went up, which would increase the taxes. So that fills the cup a little bit more with property taxes, but does not increase the size of the cup or our total funding. And then we've talked about a little bit about our big three, the reasons that we have are working on our budget and have some challenges this year, but basically statewide as well. Record inflation, of course, our ESSER funds are ending, and no change in the basic allotment. And of course, that's a statewide, nationwide shortage of staff and those kind of things that we're also facing. But those are our big three challenges that are causing us some things to work on. We came forward last meeting and brought forward 3 different scenarios. The only real change that we've looked at here is we would still do the retention stipends as we've done in the past. What we looked at is one other thing that we did prior year was the sign-on bonuses for new teachers. That allows them to get a check. We did it at the August 31 or the end of August check. Otherwise, they would not get their first check until September 15th. So they start in August 2nd or 3rd, I believe we report this year. And so they would not get a check for about 6 weeks. So, and that's one thing that we did last year. Now, they would not be eligible for the first retention stipend in September because they would be new to that. That would be the change to both scenarios 1 and 2 as we rolled those out before. And then this is just basically a high level kind of in words, the scenarios that we did with continuing the salary step for all of our people that are on the schedule, teachers, librarians, RNs, and that. Continue the current retention stipends and teacher recruitment stipends through the local budget as opposed to the ESSER funds. And that put us at a budget deficit of just under $5 million and left our fund balance at about $48 million in that range. And then scenario 2 was basically the same process, but we added an additional 1% stipend for pay grades that were A6 and T6 below that range. So basically that would be just for the lower levels, not the administration and that group. So basically assistant directors, assistant principals, and on up would not receive that additional 1%. But in essence, everyone would at least get what they got last year. So there would be not a reduction in salary or compensation for staff. And then also what we did there too was the second scenario. We changed previous year the stipend. It was a $250 minimum for each one of those 2% payouts in September, December, and May. What we would do this year for those people would be a $500 minimum, and that affects about probably 700 of our staff that custodial, food service, paras, and those kind of things that are on the lower end of our pay scale. And that would put our budget impact approximately a little over $6 million negative, leave our fund balance at about $47 million, or about 101 days. And that's really the only change at this point, but we just wanted to give a chance for any feedback on those. We did not include the third scenario at this point, which we felt like we got feedback. We would have to reduce compensation a great deal to do that, and so we crossed that one out. And that wasn't one that we would recommend, so we felt like the board felt comfortable with that.
Kevin, I just want to thank y'all for working on getting the teachers paid and not waiting 6 weeks. I know we discussed this in our meeting, and last year at the new teacher welcome at Bryan High, I had about 3 or 4 new teachers that told me that was a rough time. I know for some of us it gets hard to remember. For some of us it was just last month, but for most of us. So I do appreciate that, and I think our teachers, our new teachers especially, I hope they appreciate that, and thank you so much for doing all the research and work on that.
Yeah, and then it also helps with recruiting as well.
Yes,
for HR when they're going to recruiting
Yes, sir.
to bring in new staff.
We look forward to, we'll officially approve our budget in July,
No.
correct?
No,
June, next
Next
June
meeting.
meeting, our
Next-
next June meeting. So
next
as we
16.
continue to hear all these budget updates, that gets refined, and we will be doing that at our next night meeting.
Yes, ma'am. About 14 days.
Perfect.
I've been
Thank you.
I've been counting down. Yes.
Okay.
It's
Well,
numbers.
Kevin,
That's what he
you
does.
can stay put. We'll move to our next information item, the Bryan ISD compensation overview. This is going to be presented with the Texas Association of School Boards representative. We welcome Miss Amy Campbell, as well as Shay Szynski from our Human Resources Department. So we appreciate you all providing this information item to us today.
Okay. So I was just going to make sure, we're here today, we're talking about our payroll and our procedures and practices as we go through, and it's a good time to look at that and review it. And of course, we've done, as we did with the budget review, we brought in Amanda Brownson from TASBO, an outside source, someone that works with other districts and looks at many different variables and things that they go through. But today we have Miss Amy Campbell, is Director of HR Services from the Texas Association of School Boards. Amy has joined HR Services in 2012. She has more than 20 years of experience in human resources, including 19 years as HR consultant for school districts and other public sector organizations. She has a bachelor's degree from Florida State University and is a Society for Human Resource Management certified professional, and has received human resources management, or has received a professional human capital leader in education certification as well. I would mention that TASB HR Services is celebrating its 40th anniversary serving Texas public schools this year, and they have more than 1,000 members. They support over 200 districts each year in compensation services, plus many more for staffing reviews, training, employee surveys, et cetera. So very qualified to take a look at ours and help us work through and make sure that we are on the right track with our compensation and the processes and procedures that we do in our pay structure.
And I would just like to add that she has met with our team this morning prior to the board meeting, and we were kind of reviewing our compensation procedures. It was great just having that third-party entity come in, the experts come in and look at what we're doing in HR. We're cross-training. It's just timely due to Carol's retirement, us going into Skyward. You know, it's going into a new system. We want to make sure we've got everything correct, up to date, as best as possible. So it was great meeting with Amy this morning with our team, and we'll continue to meet with her after the board meeting today.
Thank you. All right, hello. I am going to talk through some slides, but by all means, if something is not clear and it needs to be clearer to you, let me know. So first I want to begin by defining pay equity. As part of the administrative pay equity review, we looked at legal compliance as far as pay equity goes, but there are lots of other personalized definitions of pay equity to employees. So as a legal definition, pay equity is the concept that equal work deserves equal pay, regardless of an employee's race, gender, ethnicity, age, religion, or other non-job related factors. That's the legal definition of pay equity, and so that's the lens within which we reviewed compensation for administrators. There are also personalized definitions of pay equity, and this data comes from a Gartner survey of more than 3,500 employees, where fewer than a third of employees in this survey, so 32%, felt like their pay was fair, and 34% believe that their pay is equitable. So we can often feel as employees like our pay may not be fair, but it may be equitable and legally compliant. And so just want to clarify what we're talking about. There is an impact to pay equity feelings from employees. Employees who perceive their pay as inequitable have a 15% lower intent to stay employed with their current employer, and 13% are less engaged at work, which means they're less productive. And so it is important for employees to feel like their pay is fair. And so really just wanted to carve out that definition between legally compliant pay equity and the perception of pay equity as otherwise defined. So I want to talk also briefly just about compensation systems and pay structures, because it is important to understand the systems within which our employees are paid. For all of your non-teacher staff, you have pay ranges applied, and there's a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum for each of those ranges. And our goal and that's true for many organizations, even outside of public education, but our goal is to have people paid as close to market and clustered around market value. And so we try to move people to that market within the range, and we try to keep our ranges moving as market moves as well. So this is kind of the visual of your pay boxes or pay structure, and that's kind of the framework within which we're talking about employee pay today. So there are three different types of pay equity that employees and employers think about: external, internal, and individual. External pay equity is kind of just what it sounds like. It's the relationship of an organization's pay relative to the pay of other employers. That's measured in two different ways. One is by individual pay. So how am I paid relative to people in similar jobs in other organizations? But also structurally, how is your pay structure compared to the pay structures of other organizations? That is what I think we often think about when we think about pay, is how are we paying compared to our neighbors, our competitors. The second type of pay equity is internal pay equity. That's the relationship of jobs to one another within the organization. So the relative value of my job to other jobs within the same employer. That's really, again, just trying to align positions based on their value within the organization. The most complex, and I think the one that generates the most employee feedback, is individual equity. That's how I am valued within the organization based on the whatever the organization values about me. That's oftentimes measured as unique skills, education, experience, certifications and licenses or other credentials. That can be longevity and that can be performance. In public education, it's almost exclusively, typically defined as experience, education, and then credentials or licenses. We typically don't get too deep into the performance pay measurement for most positions in school districts. And longevity is often an add-on to pay, an added pay piece, but typically not what drives our base pay. And so, these things are fairly objectively measured until we get down to the performance part of these categories. But because it's oftentimes not super clear to employees how these things are measured, it can create confusion and potentially frustration on the part of employees to help understand why I'm paid what I'm paid. So real quick before we dive into the pay, this is all background information, before we dive into the pay process, I just wanted to bring to your attention that for every employer, there are a slew of laws that we have to comply with, dating as far back as 1963 with the Equal Pay Act, which dictated equal pay for equal work for men and women. Then for many years after that, we continued to add laws at the federal level that guided fair pay for other factors like age, gender, race, national origin, and things like that. So we're all, as employers, operating within the confines of these federal laws. So the process that we went through to review administrative pay for staff in your district was we collected pay data, and that included the demographic characteristics of employees that normally is not shared with us as part of a pay process when we're just looking at the external and internal pay competitiveness. But when we start looking at individual pay competitiveness, we have to dig down deeper into those dimensions of diversity. We had some kickoff discussions, but it's important for y'all to know that the extent of those discussions was helping to understand the data that we had and understanding the procedures that are currently in place. We operated from a lot of a divide, let's say, between a separation between our analysis and district input, because we wanted to have a very objective and clear view of the data and make judgments based on the data and the procedures alone. So our process was to really look for patterns. I want to be very clear, and you'll probably hear me say this a few more times. We were not looking at individual employees and their salary placement in a vacuum. It was a pattern. We were looking for patterns where we were looking at employees within a pay grade based on their dimensions of diversity. Salary systems and pay systems are constantly evolving, and they change every time a new person comes in to the pay system, every time we hire someone new, as well as every time we've got change in administration at all levels. And so it is really difficult to make concrete judgments about pay fairness when we're looking at one person's pay individually. We need to look at it in a more systemic way. We also reviewed your pay administration procedures to determine that, I'll talk about what we found, but really wanted to look at them to determine whether they were accurately placing value on employees based on what the district wanted to accomplish, and if they were appropriately aligning with those federal laws we just talked about. And then the last step is reviewing a summary of findings, which we're doing today, and recommendations, which will also happen in just a moment. So if you're not familiar with your administrative pay group, we looked at all 13 pay grades within that administrative and professional pay structure. That includes 240 employees, or did in the data snapshot we looked at. And we're not sharing data today about that because there are some pay grades that have as few as 3 people, and it would really be difficult to speak about those in open session without talking about individual pay. And so we're trying to broaden it to those pay grade level discussions. So also need to define what we talk about, or what I'm talking about when I say dimensions of diversity. For each of those broad protected classes that the district has captured employee data for, we've separated them into dimensions of diversity. So for age, a protected class is 40 or older, and so we're looking at younger than 40 years compared to 40 years and older. Gender is female and male. Race is white, black, multi-race, or American Indian. And ethnicity is captured as Hispanic or non-Hispanic. And this is based on employee reported data to the district, who then reported it to us. So our steps, again, were to analyze pay equity by dimension and then by pay grade. So we've captured that employee data in those categories, and we're plotting pay by experience and by dimension, and you'll see a couple sample charts of that in a moment. And again, just to reiterate, we looked for patterns more than individual determinations. We asked questions like, do pay rates track with experience? And are there pay differences that could be attributed to a dimension of diversity? So just to be clear, this is not Bryan ISD data, but here are 3 sample charts to show what charts for your employees did look like. The far left category or chart is based on the age category, and so there's red triangle showing folks who reported to be greater than 40 years or greater, and then the blue circles are for employees who were under 40 years. And so the axis that you see on the left is pay rates, and the bottom axis is years of experience. And so you'll see for the charts that there is clearly a trend of pay where pay increases as experience increases. With any pay system, there will be outliers for many, many reasons, but we were far less concerned with outliers at the top end of pay because we're not going to recommend to reduce anyone's pay. We were really most concerned with folks who might fall below those trends and warrant an adjustment up to those trend levels. The second middle chart shows you the race dimension of diversity, and then the far right is ethnicity. The last one just didn't fit on the chart here, but or on the slide rather, but it was gender. So I also mentioned procedures. We did review your pay placement procedures, and we asked questions like, are they designed to measure employee value appropriately, and do they allow for repeatable results? We want to make sure that 2 independent staff could arrive at the same conclusion using your pay procedures. Okay, so to the meat of things, the findings are captured here. We did not identify patterns of administrative pay inequity attributable to dimensions of diversity in Bryan ISD. There were no clear patterns in race, ethnicity, gender, or age in terms of differential pay based on those dimensions of diversity. The pay trends were very clear based on experience, and so again, no clear patterns attributable to dimensions of diversity. Your pay procedures, while they do certainly warrant a refresh, they're definitely based on measurable criteria that are not tied to dimensions of diversity. They focus very heavily on experience and degree attainment, which is almost universal across the state as far as what districts typically measure pay value on. And so you do match that. I think it may just warrant some refreshing, and I'm jumping ahead to the recommendations here, but warrant some refreshing, but certainly still not any connection to any discriminatory pay practices. So changes in pay placement procedures over time may have impacted those pay trends and pay alignment in the district. So as procedures have changed and new methodologies have been used, it has, I think, resulted in some staff who were hired more recently being placed using a different methodology than staff who were hired in the past. And so part of our goal through the realignment of procedures is to help connect those 2 methodologies and blend the differences. And so you can arrive at a spot that feels fair, equitable, defensible, and repeatable, where we're making sure that there's better alignment between what used to happen and then what the new process. processes. A small number of pay rates may be out of alignment with pay rates of other incumbents within the same pay grade. And we do think that there is a small number of employees who warrant additional review. However, I want to be very clear that those pay differentials do not appear to be related to their dimensions of diversity. Some of the folks who appear to be outliers do not have a dimension of diversity that would trigger an additional review based on any discriminatory practices. Really, there are just perhaps some folks who fall below the pay trends based on how experience has been captured and what decisions have been made in the past that might warrant some additional review for adjustment. We've kind of started this one already, but the district should review pay placement procedures to ensure they accurately reflect your intended methodology and compensation values. As Shay mentioned, we started those discussions this morning and we'll continue those moving forward. It's just to be sure everyone's on the same page about how experience will be valued. And then how does that become clear and shareable outside of the HR office and administration team? And then the district should ensure HR staff tasked with making those determinations are trained on the new processes. It's really just we want to make sure whatever procedures you adopt are rolled out to everyone who needs to know about them. And then finally, this is just, again, wrapping up the recommendation I just talked about. For those staff that fall outside of the expected ranges, we would suggest that their salaries be reviewed with experience data and that any adjustments needed to realign them into that pay trend pathway, that those be reconsidered as well. And I think that was all that I had planned to share, but happy to answer questions.
So you're saying we're not perfect, but there's nothing intentional that has been, that's the bottom line, is that
Absolutely, and no one is. I think we would find the same kind of feedback and results from most any district we looked at. But yes, absolutely no connection to discriminatory pay practices that I can see. There's no pattern in the data where a particular dimension of diversity consistently, where people with a particular dimension of diversity are paid in a different fashion than others. It's kind of all over the place.
So you're not saying that there may be some that are, the dimensions of diversity fall in that category, but the reason they're being paid is not because of their
It does not appear to be,
diversity.
absolutely not.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
And you typically do this, how many districts do you work with, Amy?
So we work with 200 districts a year on compensation reviews where we're looking at, for the most part, the other factors, external competitiveness, internal competitiveness, and internal individual pay equity as it relates to those typical measurable qualities like experience, degree attainment, certifications, licenses, et cetera. We do usually 1 to 2 pay equity reviews a year for districts such as yourself that have contacted us and said, hey, we need a different type of pay review or an additional aspect of that.
And just so that we're all on the same page, the board authorized a salary study or the compensation study several years ago, I believe in 2021.
21, 22,
Yes.
yeah, the district conducted a full pay review that focused on market competitiveness, internal equity, things like that. This is kind of the add-on deep dive into administrative pay equity.
I'm sorry, Julie, go ahead, I apologize.
No, I was just, so as I read this report, what I'm struck with is there's really just nothing very remarkable about it. Yeah.
That's pretty much what we found, is
Okay.
there's nothing that jumps out or no patterns of pay inequity that should be concerning to you as a board or to the administration. There's certainly room for improvement, but that would be true for any district or any employer for that matter. I think there's always room to look at pay and make adjustments, but certainly no patterns of inequity or inappropriate pay decisions accordingly.
Do you find those patterns often, or have you before, where they're?
We have not. It's for better or for worse, most public education entities focus almost entirely on experience and degree attainment for pay decisions. And so it's very there's very fewer other factors that weigh in on a pay decision. And so nearly everyone across the state, I mean, over the years, I think we've worked with 700 to 800 of the districts in the state. And almost exclusively, every district puts all of their eggs in the experience and degree basket. And so that's almost exclusively what people are using to determine pay. I have not personally encountered any district that has broad scale or widespread discriminatory pay practices. That's not to say that no district has never made an inappropriate pay decision based on a protected class factor, but I have never seen a broad scale issue.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much, Amy and team, and I hope that we all can appreciate the transparency of revisiting these kind of issues periodically, and as a team, just from the HR perspective, making sure that, you know, we're doing all the things that we can to value our employees appropriately. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We've already done citizens' comments, so we will now move to items for discussion and our action on our consent agenda. If there's no concerns about the many items that are listed on the consent agenda, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I didn't want to pull one, but I just want to ask for, since the public might wonder, what the letters mean in number 1, PA/IPPA. Sorry about that.
Yes, the IPPA refers to the integrated systems of our phones and our PA systems.
Public address.
Okay.
Yes.
Public address
system.
yes.
Yes. Sorry, I did it by habit.
Yes.
But I don't know the exact words, but I could get them for you.
Okay, I just want to make sure that somebody was looking at this, that they
Oh,
know what
yes.
we're talking about. Thank you.
I've looked at it, yes, many times.
Thank you.
I move approval of all the items listed on the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Mr. McCall, seconded by Ms. Waller. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion passes. All right, scroll through to our first item for discussion and our action on our regular agenda comes from Business Services. Consider approval of a contract for secondary renovations. We welcome our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, Mr. Kevin Besaw, back to the podium.
Yes, ma'am, thank you again. This is the second part of our campus renovations that we're about to get started on this summer. At the last meeting, we brought forward the elementary group that we were working on, and of course, this is all coordinated with summer school, and you can do part of the campuses during the summer, and the other campuses will get next year or they had previous year. But this particular one, it's going to be work done at Dopla Middle School, the MC Harris Annex, Long Intermediate, Rayburn Intermediate, and SFA Middle School and PAC. The total amount of these is the estimated at budget for bond steering. When we did that was about $2.8 million. We sent out, I believe it was 622 invites to bid on this. We received 2 responses. Both of these were local companies, so and they came in under the estimated amount by almost $900,000. But the contract is recommended awarded to the company. They were both low bid and high score on their qualifications. And they also, I might mention, they did the SFA Annex for us. They were one of the very first projects that we did with the 2020 bond, and started actually during COVID, I believe. So did a great job for us. We would be very glad to work with them again.
I move approval of the contract with Chakotay Construction in the amount of $1,924,406 for secondary interior and exterior renovations as presented.
Second.
All right, thank you. It's been moved by Mr. McCall, seconded by Ms. Waller. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion is approved. All right. Then we'll move to consider approval of a purchase over $50,000 for the replacement of the projector in the Rudder Performing Arts Center. Mr. Beesaw.
Yes, ma'am. So we have, I have Mr. Pat here.
Pat Corbin.
Oh, old projector bad, new
Yes, I
projector
know.
good.
Well, I'm thinking of how many times Pat has called me about this projector because it's difficult.
Pat is
and
here
I-
to make
and
sure.
I lost.
Exactly.
I knew it wasn't Pat projector, but so anyway. But this is the projector for the Rudder Performing Arts Center. It's no longer working as well as in current projector technology. It's obsolete. Let me start over with that. The one is no longer working, and as well that the current projector technology is obsolete, or what we have is obsolete according to current technology. It's not really repair, is not feasible because of the age of it. If you remember, this one actually capability to connect via VGA, which I don't even know if that's a thing anymore. And so we've worked on finding a viable alternative, a replacement for this, and this could be funded with the 2020 bond. Right.
Mr. Esau, I move approval of, or I'm sorry,
Sorry.
Dr. Harlan, I move approval of the contract to Covenant Communications in the amount of $72,901.71 as presented.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Mr. Gonzalez and seconded by Mr. Stasny. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Motion is approved. All right.
Thank you.
And we already spent our time in closed session, so we do have one motion. And I believe Mr. Gonzalez has.
Dr. Harlan, I move to approve the superintendent's recommendation for Ms. Ashley Lopez as the principal at Mary Branch Elementary.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Mr. Gonzalez, seconded by Mr. Stasny. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. All right, there being no further business, we will now adjourn. It's 3:13 PM.